You think the narcissist erased you from their mind? Absolutely not. They remember you far more intensely when you disappear than when you were standing right in front of them. Your silence doesn't wipe you out. It reveals something they never expected, that you have become the one thing they can no longer command or influence. And here's the truth they desperately hope you never discover. Going beyond simple no contact doesn't just liberate you on the surface, it puts you in a psychological position they can't invade, can't replace, and can't replicate. I'm going to show you exactly why that happens. If you're ready to understand how your inner freedom affects the narcissist and how to protect that freedom permanently, stay here because what comes next will shift the way you see this entire dynamic. The first point is simple but deeply unsettling. A narcissist does not remember you because of who you authentically were. They remember you because of what you provided them. When someone regularly boosts their ego, calms their insecurities, or mirrors back the idealized image they want to believe in, that person becomes psychologically valuable to them, not emotionally valuable, psychologically valuable. To a narcissist, you functioned as a source of validation, stability, admiration, and emotional labor. These resources matter far more to them than the connection itself. When that source vanishes, the absence creates a gap in their supply chain, and that gap stays in their memory like a bruise they keep pressing just to feel some sense of stimulation. You may think they move on instantly because they pretend to be indifferent or easily distracted, but that is only the performance. Beneath the facade, the narcissist operates through rigid patterns, and you were part of a pattern that benefited them. Once a pattern is formed, they don't discard it. They store it for later use. They archive it in their emotional storage, not because they care deeply for you, but because you once served a function reliably. Their memory is transactional. They recall you the way someone remembers a tool that worked perfectly and could be useful again. Even when they mistreated you, dismissed your emotions, or replaced you overnight, the attachment to what you represented doesn't simply fade. It lingers as a mental shortcut. You were someone they could emotionally access without having to earn a single thing. That kind of access doesn't evaporate from their mind because effortless supply is rare. And the moment you walk away, especially with awareness and self respect, you interrupt the role they assign to you. They do not forget interruptions. They do not forget challenges to their perceived authority. They do not forget the people who suddenly stop giving them what they feel entitled to. This is why your memory stays active in their internal world. Not because they cherish you, but because the part of you they exploited is gone. And that loss forces them to remember the usefulness you once provided. Going beyond no contact means understanding that silence by itself does not heal the psychological mark the narcissist left behind. You can block their number, unfollow their accounts, and remove them physically from your life. But the internal imprint they created doesn't disappear with a single click. Narcissists attach themselves to the vulnerable spaces inside you. Your yearning to be understood, your wish to feel chosen, your hope that love can mend what's broken. These are the openings they depend on. As long as those internal wounds remain unhealed, they still have emotional access to you, even if they cannot reach you in the physical world. This is why many people go no contact but still feel haunted by memories, fantasies, guilt, confusion, or a strange emotional pull back toward the very person who wounded them. The real battle isn't on your phone screen, it's inside your nervous system. The narcissist leaves behind patterns of self doubt, hypervigilance, and emotional reflexes conditioned through cycles of idealization and devaluation. To truly break free, you have to heal these reflexes, not just the relationship. You must reclaim the parts of yourself that adapted to their chaos. You have to unlearn the idea that love means proving yourself, fixing someone, or accepting emotional crumbs. Going beyond no contact means rewriting the story you told yourself about why you stayed, why you tolerated harmful behavior, and why their approval once felt essential. It means understanding the psychological tactics they used on you: intermittent reinforcement, guilt hooks, future faking, trauma bonding, and then taking back the power you unknowingly handed over to those strategies. When you do this internal work, the narcissist loses the last form of control they ever had, the emotional version of you that was still tied to them even after the relationship ended. The freedom that comes from this depth of healing is something a narcissist cannot touch. It isn't loud or dramatic. It's a quiet shift inside where their opinion stops mattering, their memory stops hurting, and their existence stops defining how you see yourself. When you walk away from a narcissist, your silence does something far more powerful than most people understand. It creates a wound in them they cannot easily ignore. Your absence is not just the lack of a person. It's the disruption of an emotional economy built around your reactions, your empathy, and your dependability. Narcissists rely on predictable supply, and you stepping out of the pattern feels not only inconvenient, but offensive to their inflated sense of importance. This is what we call a narcissistic injury, the sting they feel when reality contradicts their fantasy of endless control and superiority. They may not show it. They may act calm, indifferent, or pretend they have already replaced you, but their internal world doesn't work the way healthy individuals' inner worlds do. They don't experience loss the same way. Instead of sadness, they feel destabilized. Instead of longing, they feel threatened. Instead of reflecting, they obsess over the disruption of the pattern. Silence becomes a mirror that forces them to confront something they've spent their entire lives avoiding: their own internal emptiness. So they loop mentally, revisiting your memory, replaying the last interactions, wondering how someone they believed they owned slipped out of their grasp without giving them a chance to reassert dominance. Even if they never contact you, the internal loop remains active. They may quietly stalk your social media, ask mutual connections about you, or go through unpredictable phases where your name pops into their mind like an unsettled itch. They don't miss you as a partner. They miss the grip they had on your emotional world. They don't miss connection. They miss supply. This internal replay is not romantic, it's strategic. They store your memory as unfinished business because unresolved loops make them feel off balance. Your silence pushes them into a psychological discomfort they cannot soothe or erase. And that discomfort becomes the reason they don't forget you. It's not love, it's the injury they cannot undo. A narcissist doesn't remember the relationship the way you do. They recall the control, the dominance, and the benefits they extracted from you. When you leave, what sticks in their memory is not the laughter or the meaningful moments you believed were shared. What they remember is the pattern you fit into, the pattern where they stood elevated and you were manageable. That is why detachment threatens them so deeply. You weren't just a person in their life. You were a role that held their fragile identity together. When that role disappears, they lose a piece of the psychological structure they use to steady themselves. Narcissists rely heavily on external affirmation to maintain their identity. They don't have an internal reservoir of self-worth, so they build their entire sense of self from how others respond to them. You were part of that scaffolding. Your admiration, your attention, your emotional energy, these were proof to them that they mattered, that they were significant, that they were superior. When you detach, you take away that proof. Your absence becomes a crack in the identity they desperately protect. This is why detachment is more threatening to them than conflict. Arguing keeps you engaged. Explaining keeps you engaged. Even expressing anger keeps you emotionally connected to them. But detachment is different. It sends a message they cannot tolerate. You finally see them clearly. You are no longer participating in the illusion. You are no longer accepting the distorted reality they tried to wrap around you. And the moment you truly see through them, a subtle but powerful shift occurs. They lose the sense of dominance they once held over you. That loss becomes unforgettable for them, not because they treasured you, but because your quiet detachment marks the moment their control dissolved. A narcissist will remember the person who slipped beyond their emotional reach more vividly than the person who adored them. Control defines the relationship in their mind. Losing control defines the memory. And your emotional detachment becomes a permanent reminder of that loss, one they cannot mentally delete no matter how hard they try. What most people don't realize is that emotional growth is the one thing a narcissist can neither predict nor manage. They operate under the assumption that you will always react the way you used to. By explaining yourself, trying to fix the situation, seeking closure, hoping for the version of them who once acted loving, your emotional evolution destroys that cycle. When you begin healing, setting boundaries, and recognizing patterns more clearly, you shift from being reactive to becoming self-directed. This shift confuses them because their entire strategy depends on your predictability. As long as you remain who you were during the relationship, they know exactly which strings to pull. But once you grow emotionally and mentally, you become someone they cannot map. And that unpredictability shakes them more than silence ever could. The narcissist remembers the version of you they trained, the version of you who would bend, over-explain, forgive too quickly, and accept less than you deserved. But when you outgrow that version, you destroy the psychological blueprint they constructed for interacting with you. That is why your growth haunts them. They cannot manipulate someone who now recognizes the manipulation. They cannot guilt someone who no longer feels responsible for their emotions. They cannot shame someone who has rebuilt their sense of self-worth. They cannot use confusion on someone who now understands the cycle. They cannot use fear on someone who is no longer afraid to lose them. Your emotional evolution confronts them with something they avoid at all costs: the truth that they are not as powerful as they pretend to be. It forces them to face the uncomfortable reality that they never truly controlled you. They only controlled the wounded parts of you. And when those parts heal, their influence evaporates. And what evaporates feels like personal rejection to them, even if you never said a word. This is why your personal growth becomes unforgettable. It exposes their limits. It breaks their script. It shatters their fantasy of dominance. A narcissist can replace attention, can replace affection, and can replace people, but they cannot replace the experience of losing control over someone they once shaped. What stays with a narcissist long after the relationship ends isn't your silence, your distance, or your absence. It's the version of you that no longer exists. The part of you that healed becomes the thing they remember most because it directly contradicts the story they built in their mind about you and about the power they believed they had over you. Narcissists depend on people staying the same. They assume the wounds they caused will keep you small, doubtful, insecure, and easy to pull back into the old dynamic. When you grow beyond those wounds, you challenge their entire internal narrative. You become living proof that their influence was temporary, not permanent. This shift inside you is something they do not understand because narcissists never truly grow. They repeat the same emotional cycles, the same external blame, the same shallow coping mechanisms. So when you evolve, when you become more grounded, more self aware, more emotionally stable, it highlights exactly how emotionally stagnant they are. They don't forget that contrast. In their worldview, being outgrown feels like a deep insult. Even if you never intended to insult them, it makes them feel replaceable, ordinary, and powerless. Three feelings they spend their entire lives trying to escape. Your growth also creates a comparison they cannot avoid. You healing shows them all the places within themselves that remain unhealed. You finding clarity shows them the confusion they still live in. You setting boundaries exposes how boundaryless and dependent they really are. And although they'll never admit it, they know that the growth you achieved is something they could never provide you. It came from leaving them, not loving them. This is why they replay your story in their mind. Not because they miss the relationship, but because your transformation threatens their self constructed identity. It disrupts their belief that they had permanent emotional power over you. A narcissist can handle being ignored, replaced, or blocked, but being outgrown hits a deeper insecurity, one that reminds them they are not nearly as significant as they pretend to be. And once you grow beyond their reach, that realization becomes a memory they cannot discard, no matter how determined they are to forget. Going beyond no contact means reclaiming the pieces of yourself that were overshadowed, silenced, or reshaped by the relationship. It's not just the external distance that matters, it's the internal shift where you stop defining yourself through the lens of what the narcissist wanted, demanded, or expected from you. When you were with them, your boundaries were violated, your instincts were questioned, and your reality was bent to fit their narrative. Even after the relationship ends, traces of those distortions often remain. You may still doubt your decisions, feel guilty when choosing yourself, or experience a confusing emotional pull toward the very person who caused the pain. Going beyond no contact means dismantling these internal residues piece by piece. It's the process of learning to trust yourself again, believing your perceptions again, and rebuilding an identity not shaped by their approval or their judgment. It means examining the emotional habits you developed, walking on eggshells, over explaining, suppressing your needs, and replacing those with healthier, self respecting patterns. It means recognizing that their reactions are no longer your responsibility and their lack of empathy is no longer your burden. The more you reconnect with your true voice, the less their influence echoes inside your mind. This kind of healing also involves redefining what love, safety, connection, and peace actually feel like. You start to understand that intensity is not intimacy, chaos is not passion, inconsistency is not love. You reclaim the right to feel safe inside your own emotional space. As you do this work, the narcissist loses the power they once had to trigger you, confuse you, or pull you back into old cycles. Your boundaries stop being reactive defenses and instead become natural expressions of who you are. Going beyond no contact is ultimately the shift from survival mode into authentic self alignment. It's the moment you stop running from your past and begin moving toward a future that reflects your truth. And in that shift, the narcissist becomes smaller, quieter, and less relevant. You are no longer the version of yourself they tried to mold. You become the version you were meant to be all along. Going beyond no contact means closing those internal doors, not with bitterness, but with clarity. This closure isn't dramatic. It doesn't require confrontation. It's a quiet state where your heart no longer jumps at their name, your mind no longer rehearses what you'd say if they returned, and your body no longer braces for emotional impact. When you reach this stage, the narcissist loses the last lifeline they ever had to you. Emotional access was their power source. The ability to confuse you, charm you, guilt you, destabilize you, or pull you into old patterns. That was their advantage. Once that inner link dissolves, they become simply another person in your past, stripped of the emotional weight they once carried. This is the moment that unsettles them the most. Narcissists can handle being blocked, confronted, or criticized because those reactions still mean you are emotionally engaged. What they cannot handle is emotional neutrality. When you stop seeking validation, stop wanting closure, stop reacting altogether, you eliminate the energy that used to fuel the entire dynamic. They become irrelevant inside your internal world. And that irrelevance is something they cannot control or reverse. Emotional freedom is what makes you truly unreachable. Not unreachable physically, but unreachable psychologically. And when the narcissist finally understands that nothing they say, nothing they promise, and nothing they attempt can pull you back into the old dynamic, that realization becomes the one memory they cannot erase, no matter how hard they try.